A land steeped in myth and legend, where the crown has passed through more hands than a well-loved heirloom. We're diving headfirst into over 1,000 years of royal drama, political chess games, and yes, more family feuds than even the most dramatic of soap operas could dream up. From kings and queens who ruled with iron fists to those whose reigns crumbled like sandcastles, the story of the British monarchy is as riveting as it is enduring. So buckle up as we journey through the ages, uncovering the triumphs, tragedies, and twists that shaped the throne and the nation itself. Our story begins not with the Scots or the English, but with a Saxon prince named Egbert the Third, born in 771 AD. Now, England, as we know it, didn't exist back then. Instead, the British Isles were a patchwork of warring kingdoms, each vying for power. Young Egbert was born into this chaos, the son of a king and the grandson of another. But as fate would have it, Egbert's father died when he was just 10, leading to a bloody scramble for the crown. Egbert challenged his rival, lost, and was exiled to France. But this was no ordinary exile. Egbert spent his time learning the fine arts of military leadership at the French court. In 800 AD, after the death of his rival, Egbert returned to claim his father's throne, and after much struggle, became King of Wessex in 802 AD. He didn't stop there. He consolidated his power and eventually brought most of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms under his control, earning the title of Bretwalda, or Wide Ruler of Britain. Egbert's legacy was carried forward by his son Ethelwulf, who faced a new and terrifying threat: the Danes. These axe-wielding invaders launched a series of brutal raids on the British Isles, forcing Ethelwulf to forge an uneasy alliance with Mercia, a longtime rival. After Ethelwulf's death, his son Ethelbald took the throne, but his reign was short and scandalous, mainly due to his decision to marry his father's widow, which, even by medieval standards, was considered a bit much. Ethelbald was soon succeeded by his brother Ethelbert, who, like his father, had to deal with Viking invasions. But it was their younger brother, Alfred, who would go down in history as Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great, the man, the myth, the legend. He not only defeated the Viking hordes, but also brought about a golden age for Anglo-Saxon England. He was a warrior, a scholar, and a lawmaker, establishing fortified towns and schools, and even dabbling in urban planning. His most significant legacy was the establishment of Danelaw, a division of England between the Saxons and the Danes, which still has cultural echoes today. Alfred's reign marked the beginning of the unification of England. After Alfred's death, his son Edward the Elder took the throne and continued his father's work, expanding his territory and consolidating power. Edward's son Athelstan became the first true king of a unified England after defeating the last Viking stronghold in Northumbria. Athelstan's victory at the Battle of Brunanburh in 937 AD was a game-changer, forcing the Scottish king to pledge allegiance to him and marking the birth of England as a unified nation. But as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. After Athelstan's death, the throne passed to his half-brother Edmund I, who spent much of his reign defending his kingdom from Danish invaders and internal rebellions. His reign was cut short when he was stabbed to death by a thief at a feast talk about a party foul. Edmund was succeeded by his brother Edred, who continued the struggle against the Danes but died young, leaving the throne to his nephew, Edwig, who didn't exactly live up to the family name. His reign was marred by scandal, including his controversial marriage to his stepmother, which led to his early death. Enter Edgar the Peaceful, who brought a rare period of tranquility to England. He introduced standardized coinage and oversaw religious reforms, but after his death in 975 AD, the throne was contested between his sons, Edward the Martyr and Ethelred the Unready. Edward won, but his reign was cut short by assassination, presumably orchestrated by supporters of his brother. Ethelred, who earned the unfortunate nickname the Unready, which actually means poorly advised, inherited a kingdom under siege by the Danes. In a desperate attempt to rid himself of his Viking problem, Ethelred ordered the St. Brice's Day Massacre, a brutal slaughter of Danes in England, which backfired spectacularly when the Danish king Swangfortbeard invaded in retaliation, forcing Ethelred to flee to Normandy. After Sweyn's sudden death, Ethelred briefly regained his throne, but his rule was anything but stable. His son Edmund Ironside took over after Ethelred's death in 1016 AD, but his reign was short-lived. The Danish prince Snut the Great defeated him in battle, marking the end of the Anglo-Saxon hegemony in England. Snut, to his credit, proved to be a capable ruler, uniting England, Denmark, and Norway under his rule, a feat that earned him the title Emperor of the North. But Snut's successors couldn't hold on to his empire. After his death in 1035 AD, England was plunged into chaos once again. His son Harold Harefoot took the throne but faced opposition from his half-brother Harthacnut, who eventually succeeded him after Harold's death. Harthacnut's reign was short and marked by harsh rule, and when he died in 1042 AD, the English throne returned to the House of Wessex with the coronation of Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor, the last Anglo-Saxon king, is perhaps best remembered for his piety and the construction of Westminster Abbey, but his reign was marred by conflict over his succession. Edward had no sons, and the throne was claimed by both Harold Godwinson, a powerful English noble, and William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed Edward had promised him the throne. When Edward died in 1066, Harold was crowned king, but William wasn't about to let that slide. And so in 1066, the Normans invaded, leading to the famous Battle of Hastings. Harold met his end with an arrow in his eye, and William of Normandy became William the Conqueror. His reign brought significant changes to England feudalism, the construction of motte and bailey castles, and the Domesday Book, a detailed survey of England's lands and resources. William's rule was harsh, but it solidified the Norman influence in England and changed the course of British history forever. William's descendants would continue to rule England, but not without their share of drama. His son William II, known as Rufus, was an unpopular king who met a mysterious end during a hunting trip a stray arrow. Perhaps not so accidental. Rufus was succeeded by his brother Henry I, who proved to be a more capable ruler, expanding royal administration and establishing the exchequer. But Henry's reign was marred by personal tragedy. His only son drowned in the wreck of the White Ship, leading to a succession crisis that would plunge England into civil war. This war, known as the Monarchy, pitted Henry's daughter Matilda against her cousin Stephen of Blois. The kingdom descended into chaos as the two sides battled for control, with Matilda briefly capturing Stephen and nearly claiming the crown. But the war dragged on until 1153, when Stephen agreed to a truce, naming Matilda's son, Henry, as his heir. Stephen died the following year, and Henry II took the throne, marking the beginning of the Plantagenet dynasty. Henry II was a force to be reckoned with. He restored royal authority, expanded his territories, and established legal reforms that would lay the foundation for English common law. But Henry's reign was also marked by his tumultuous relationship with Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. What started as a friendship ended in tragedy when Becket was murdered in Canterbury Cathedral, supposedly on Henry's orders. Racked with guilt, Henry performed public penance, but the damage was done. Becket became a martyr, and Henry's legacy was forever tainted. Henry's sons would go on to challenge him in a series of rebellions, leading to a strained and tragic end for the once powerful king. His son Richard I, better known as Richard the Lionheart, ascended the throne in 1189. A warrior king through and through, Richard spent most of his reign on crusade in the Holy Land, leaving England in the hands of his brother John. Despite his bravery on the battlefield, Richard's absence from England left the kingdom vulnerable, and when he was captured and held for ransom, it was John who ruled in his stead. John, however, was not the hero England needed. Known as John Lackland due to his lack of inheritance, he proved to be an unpopular and ineffective ruler. His reign was marked by heavy taxation, military failures, and conflicts with the nobility. John's actions led to the creation of the Magna Carta in 1215, a document that limited the power of the king and laid the groundwork for constitutional government in England. Despite his attempts to cling to power, John died in 1216, leaving his 9-year-old son, Henry III, to inherit the throne. Henry III's reign was long and fraught with challenges. Like his predecessors, he faced rebellions and conflicts with the barons, leading to the Provisions of Oxford in 1258, which further limited royal authority. But Henry's reign also saw the rise of Parliament as a formal institution, a development that would have lasting implications for English governance. As we bring this chapter of British history to a close, it's clear that the story of the monarchy is one of resilience, power struggles, and an ever-evolving relationship between the crown and its subjects. From the rise of the Anglo-Saxon kings to the Norman conquest and the establishment of Magna Carta, each chapter has left its mark on the nation. We continue with the dawn of the Tudor dynasty, where the chessboard of English history saw some of its most famous and infamous players. Henry VII, our shrewd king who quite literally fought his way to the throne, married Elizabeth of York, thus uniting the warring houses of Lancaster and York. This marriage not only brought peace but also ushered in an era of administrative reform. Henry VII, ever the pragmatist, decided that royal absolutism, also known as I make the rules, and you follow them, was the way forward. He was the accountant-in-chief, revitalizing the treasury and even scoring a sweet trade deal, the Magnus Intercursus, which made England wealthy on the back of its prized wool trade. But let's be honest, folks, the Tudors are best known not for their balance sheets but for their larger-than-life personalities, none more so than Henry VIII. Now here's a king who knows how to keep things interesting. Athletic, charismatic, and with a penchant for music, Henry was the rock star of European courts. But as much as he loved a good joust, he loved getting married, even more, 6 times to be precise. And when the Pope refused to annul his first marriage so he could wed Anne Boleyn, Henry simply created his own church. Who needs Rome when you can have the Church of England? Of course, his love life was anything but smooth. Poor Anne Boleyn lost her head literally after failing to produce a male heir, and Henry's subsequent marriages were a mix of tragedy and farce. Jane Seymour died giving birth to his only son, Edward, while Anne of Cleves was dismissed as soon as she arrived because, well, she didn't quite match her portrait. Catherine Howard was another unfortunate queen who met the executioner's axe, and finally Catherine Parr outlived Henry, who passed away leaving behind a complicated legacy of religious upheaval and a nation teetering on the brink of chaos. Enter Edward VI, Henry's sickly son, who reigned briefly and saw the Protestant Reformation take full swing. However, his untimely death at 15 threw the succession into turmoil. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, was a tragic pawn in this deadly game, quickly deposed by Mary I, Henry's devout Catholic daughter. Mary, known to history as Bloody Mary, was determined to reverse the Protestant tide, and her methods were nothing short of fiery. Literally. She had over 280 Protestant martyrs burned at the stake, earning her a reputation that has endured for centuries. Her marriage to Philip of Spain was equally unpopular, and her reign ended in illness and failure. Then came Elizabeth I, the virgin queen who, despite her flirtations with various suitors, never married and instead dedicated herself to her realm. Elizabeth's reign is often seen as a golden age, where the English Renaissance flourished and the Spanish Armada was spectacularly defeated. Under Elizabeth, England began to find its footing as a global power, thanks to explorers like Sir Francis Drake and the literary genius of William Shakespeare. But Elizabeth's death without an heir led to the union of the crowns of England and Scotland under James I, the first of the Stuart monarchs. James had a knack for unifying kingdoms, but a less than stellar record with Parliament, leading to increasing tensions that would later erupt under his son, Charles I. Charles I, the king who lost his head, quite literally too, as his belief in the divine right of kings led to a catastrophic civil war. Oliver Cromwell and his new model army emerged victorious, and England briefly became a republic. Cromwell ruled with an iron fist banning Christmas, if you can believe it, and after his death, the monarchy was restored, though not without digging up Cromwell's body and hanging it posthumously. Talk about holding a grudge. The Restoration brought Charles II to the throne, a king who had learned from his father's mistakes well, some of them. He was the Merry Monarch. Known for his love of pleasure, but his reign was also marked by the Great Plague, the Great Fire of London, and further religious tensions that would set the stage for more conflict. When Charles II died without a legitimate heir, his brother James II took over, only to be ousted in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 by William of Orange and Mary II, his Protestant daughter. This bloodless revolution ensured that England would remain a Protestant nation as Parliament invited the Dutch royals to take the throne. This event solidified the power of Parliament over the monarchy, leading to the constitutional monarchy we recognize today. William and Mary's reign brought stability, but after their deaths, the throne passed to Mary's sister, Anne. Under Queen Anne, England and Scotland officially united to form Great Britain, and the country began its rise as a global superpower, albeit with more than a few bumps along the way. The Hanoverians then took the stage, beginning with George I, a king who spoke little English and cared even less for English politics, thus paving the way for the rise of the Prime Minister as the true power behind the throne. His successors, particularly George III, would face challenges that reshaped the world, none more significant than the loss of the American colonies, the French Revolution, and the Napoleonic Wars. George III, often remembered for his bouts of madness, witnessed the birth of modern Britain, though his later years were marred by personal and national crises. His son, George IV, was a spendthrift whose lavish lifestyle and scandals did little to endear him to the public, while William IV, the Sailor King, managed to pass some significant reforms before the crown passed to his niece, Victoria. And so we arrive at the Victorian era, a period of unprecedented change and expansion. Queen Victoria presided over an empire on which the sun never set, yet her reign was also marked by deep personal sorrow and a series of revolutions in industry, science, and society. Her influence extended far beyond Britain, earning her the title of the grandmother of Europe, and her reign set the stage for the modern constitutional monarchy. As we close this chapter, we find ourselves on the brink of the 20th century, with Britain poised to navigate new challenges in an ever-changing world. But that, dear listeners, is a story for another time. Thank you for joining me on this whirlwind tour through the annals of British history. If you've learned anything today, it's that ruling isn't easy, especially when your subjects keep revolting, your relatives are plotting against you, and Parliament insists on having a say. But through it all, the British monarchy has endured, adapting and evolving, and proving that sometimes the crown truly does have to be the jewel in the crown.